Welcome back to Uncharted, Season 5, Episode 1, Part 2 of 3. This is Mentorship with Léonie Weerakoon. Raised in Sri Lankan culture rooted in storytelling and elders, Léonie learned mentorship as community, not a career tool. As she moved through male-dominated rooms, she learned to choose what to absorb, what to ignore, and why, in the end, the world itself became her mentor.
It dawned on me while we were having coffee the other day that your mentorship path has been different. So the next segment that we first is like, let's get the life story. Let's give people the understanding of what that map looks like. And the second segment is mentorship impact for you. So I've got an idea. I'm gonna share that. But first, I want you to talk about mentorship impact for you. You've mentioned a couple of things already in your business and things of that nature, but how has mentorship affected you and your path? Whether the lack of, or, you've actually had some people, whether they're family or whether they're whatever the experience is that's actually mentored you and taught you.
So I think my culture is really important to share when talking about mentorship. Sri Lankan culture, we're one of the most biocritical regions in the world. That means we have some of the most endemic species in the world that you could never find anywhere else. And we're very traditional. My grandmother lived in a jungle, and still does. And we sit around. Well, she's passed away, but the home is still there.
Yeah.
Fires and tell stories. Yes. There's a lot of storytelling. There's a lot of community, family, connection, and support. Mm-hmm. And that was mentorship. I didn't really know traditional mentorship until I moved to the U.S.
Right.
And people would ask, like, well, do you have a mentor? Do you have this? And when I went into my career, that's when I realized, like, oh, okay, there are people who've done this before, would love to speak to them. But all of my mentors were always men. And because I worked and I was always like the only woman or the youngest or the only minority. And so there was a very big disconnect or the only like European, foreigner,
so many.
in like how this mentorship was showing up for me. And I definitely was picking and choosing, but mentorship for me through my travels became learning from the world and from different elders and learning more about like life.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating.
Nature.
Yeah,
nature.
No, I think that's fascinating. And this is what got me excited about having you on the show, is that when we Westerners think about mentorship today, we think about that person we're going to go talk to that's going to help us get to the next thing, right? But historically, going back to history, prior to the last 100 years, we did the jobs that our forefathers did. That's why the name blacksmith is they were blacksmiths.
Yeah.
That's it, just handed off generation to generation. It wasn't until the last 100 years when the factories and everything else made it to where you can go do another job that's not what your parents did, not your father's Oldsmobile. But your life, because of your upbringing and because of being so close to storytelling and so close to that culture, still involved a lot of storytelling and learning. And in that, what I really admire about it is you were taught respect your elders and learn from them. Mm-hmm. And you were just like observant to that. And you brought that with you in the different parts of the world, which I thought was fascinating. So whenever you look at mentorship, and I had this epiphany the other day because, quite frankly, when we first met and on LinkedIn had our talk, and we had like an hour conversation, but you're like, I did this and I did this and I did this and did this, and I'm like, right, because you've had such a storied life, and it wasn't until later where you explained this is how it happened, and this is how we traveled, and this is why it dawned on me, and last Friday when we were having coffee, dawned on me, it's like the world has been your mentor, and you see life so differently, and you try to bring it to you again, what we talked about earlier, all these experiences, you try to share that as quick as possible with where you're at, whatever it is. And so that
absolutely. And I think in that sense, I've had hundreds, maybe thousands of mentors in my lifetime. And I always felt like I couldn't really relate whenever people in the US would say, well, don't you have a mentor? Like, who do you watch and who do you read? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't really follow anyone. To me, that always felt like very cult-like. And I'm like, I don't follow just one person because I'm not a linear being.
Right.
And for me, there's so many aspects of life and things that I do, from like goldsmithing and design and artistry. And it's like, I have someone that I learn from for everything. I've had wonderful teachers.
Yeah.
A few that really stand out.
Yeah.
And I've had horrible bosses. So it's like they were a mentor and like what not to be and what not to do.
Well, I laugh because I remember in our first conversation when you're like, and I asked things because I've interviewed all these individuals and it's typically Western, right? And it's like, what are your passions? What are you meant to be doing? All this other kind of stuff. And you gave me the oddest answers. I'm not linear. I do all of these things, which to me, as I was thinking about this, I'm like, right. like because I'm in, it doesn't match the pattern of the 300 other people that I've interviewed or more than that. So I chuckle when you say that because now I get it. Now it's like, oh yeah, no, that from that perspective,
so refreshing.
From that perspective, how could you be linear when you have an upbringing and a culture in one place and you live in another place and you have these languages, 5 languages you speak because that was another part of your life. And then you have these other just unique experiences. And then when you go and part of our alignment is I get frustrated when things don't work the best they should. And so everywhere I've gone, it's like, that could be done better. Why are we doing it this way? And to take that into what I'm hearing you say is you'd step into places like your college experience and like, well, why are we doing it this? Why this versus this? Because you saw other side of it, which is really fascinating.
And I think humans are we are not linear beings,
right?
And we have built constructs and systems in certain regions. But even like if you think of the world, it is not linear, and nature is not linear, and we are part of nature, and humanity is nature. Humanity is biodiversity. We have evolved from it. Nature is the highest form of intelligence around us. It has evolved for billions of years. And I think that like when you can think of that, you just realize that the whole entire world just opens up for you, and you are allowing yourself to be more operationally efficient and really think of.
And I particularly love, and here's what the message that I'm hearing, and I hope the audience is hearing, is going back to my daughter, and I got to go pick this one thing that's such a linear thing, right? The problem I had, and you know my background before all of this media was finance, and I was, the thing I wanted to improve there, which is what we're working on now, is that every family that came in, we got to save for college. And ship our kid off to college and they'll go find themselves there and they get a job, get paid. And it's just this box. It's a linear box. And college doesn't make sense. End of story. I learned that because I saw those things as like, look, college was designed for a different period of life when we had factories and all these other things. And the audience, the communities, the world adopted that and says, this is what we're doing. But the world has changed and is nonlinear, especially now with AI and everything else. So college and education needs to grow and adapt much, much faster. I saw that because, and you look at the numbers and you study numbers, and you're like, only 25% of people actually use their degree. College expenses are so high. There's a lot of frustration. The college cliff is coming. Like, I saw that 10, 15 years ago when I was frustrated in my office seeing how expensive things were going, and what the outcome was these degrees that weren't being used. And from a finance guy, worst investment ever, right? I had a family member, not a member, but a client that went back to work for 6 years so they can put their kids to college. And then at the end of that period, he gave that money over to college and said, go find yourself. And at that point, we went from Wall Street to Vegas on that decision. So when you're saying life is not linear, I love that. Because it confirms what I've been seeing for a long time. We don't need to be doing things just because the Smiths did it or just because society is saying it. We need to think critically at every stage of life and saying, is this who I am now? And it's okay to go try this. And that's what I love about you saying I'm not linear, I'm all these things. because it's okay. And that message is loud and clear to our student audience is like, it's okay for you to go try things.
I think it is important also to share, so I'm not giving the wrong impression to anyone listening. I'm not suggesting go out and have 5 different careers, right? Because, and also college is, so, I have an education that I received overseas. That was the best education I could have received.
Sure.
I mean, we have some of the best education there. It taught me a lot.
Right.
I think I actually have a different perspective. I feel that maybe in the United States, and it also depends on like what career you're choosing. If you're a doctor, obviously, then it does make sense.
Right.
And yes, there's a lot about AI. I try not to. I also think like decades down the line, like 100 years later, what happens if we all become dependent on AI and nobody goes to college? And what do we do? What could that world also look like? I think. Also, I knew very early on, there was never a doubt in my being and understanding how to be aligned, because maybe my connection to nature and the storytelling. I've always known my interests. I've always known what I'm good at. It's always been design.
Right.
It's always been like in acting or theater and singing. So these are things that I have now been working on for 30 years. So I can have like established careers in these areas.
Well, I want to clarify. When I said doesn't make sense, I didn't say it's not useful. I didn't say we shouldn't have it. I didn't say any of those things. It doesn't make sense the way we approach it.
Yeah.
Right? Education makes sense. I'm not saying don't become educated.
Yeah.
I'm saying think critically about who you are, what you become, and it's okay not to follow the crowd. It's okay to follow your own path.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a 4-year degree, whether it's a doctor. I'm not saying, oh, you're going to be a doctor, do not go to college. Not saying that. I'm saying critically think and know that you have many options and that your life is going to do this. It's not going to be like, boom.
Absolutely, yeah. That's really important. I don't feel that, like, especially from all the interviews I've done and being partner of the largest online accelerator where I've now like actually interviewed and due diligence thousands and thousands of companies. Yeah, nobody's life is, I mean, not nobody, but most people who find some joy or find themselves in life are not very linear.
Right.
But there are people who, know very early on what they are good at and what they want to do.
And I'm glad you pointed that out because
consistency
is important. In generalities sometimes. And I have met the person that went to college, became the engineer, and had that job for 40 years and then retired.
Yeah.
Right. But rare is that individual. Most people do something, change, pivot, all kinds of stuff. So.
And that was why I started Beam, because when you know what you're passionate about, then okay, you can go get that education and then you're in it. But also going back to like one of your previous questions, I think we often have these misconceptions of what our like careers could look like, and there are very few that we are always aware of. And then we look at it as this North Star, and everything that we do for the next decade is chasing this. And then when you're in it, you realize like, wait, I didn't know I had to be like reading 90% of the time, and that was also part of why I realized that the fashion industry, there were many things about it that I didn't want to do, and I could still be in it, but it required a lot more capital and, just, yeah.
One thing I love that I learned from you the other day is you always sort of instinctively knew when your time at a place was expired or according to you. And so you didn't stay at any one place far too long, but the amount of experiences you've had, including like I was checking out at Whole Foods the other day, and I had the option of doing the Amazon hand pay, and I'm like, Léonie was a part of this because you helped connect Whole Foods and Amazon. Like you've had
for the e-store,
right? Yeah. You've had a world of experience and a world of entrepreneurial opportunities that you have found or attracted or whatever, and you always know when your time is up at that place. Which has allowed you to do so much, I believe.
Yeah. So I knew also very early on in my career, right after Circuit of the Americas, that I was good at building, ideating, accelerating, getting companies to scale. Then ultimately my next opportunity, getting companies to exit. So I started a venture studio, an operating agency, really. And I had portfolio companies where that was all I did. Now that is my brand. I work in new markets. I establish new markets. I help companies get to new markets globally and gain market share. And once they get to an exit, that's I've been offered opportunities to stay on board with a lot of these companies and full time. But for me, it just at that time when it was more enjoyable, and not just that, but I also need something that matches my lifestyle. Like we haven't even gotten into that, my family and where everyone is, and that was the only way that I was able to get that flexibility. So
very cool. Thanks for sharing that. And so much there, and the points there, especially you said something that you said people need to be able to follow their own path. And what you've seen with these interviews is people that have had joy in life have done that, because you can definitely stay stuck somewhere and not change. So part of your question was like, you've seen that, I need to move somewhere else.
Yeah.
Part of the conversation I had with my daughter the other day, she's I'm kind of stuck right now. I need to go do something different. And that's the one thing that we always have to keep evolving and moving. And I think that's a very important message to get across. Is like, when you're thinking about your next 5 years of life or wherever that looks like, ask yourself, am I having joy? Do I really like this? And know that I'm not tied to this. I'm always going to be able to move and pivot, or an opportunity will present itself for me to do something different.
Yeah. I mean, life and when you live in a system, you have to work with that system. We have to pay taxes. We need to think about retirement. These are all things that we need to be aware of. So I'm so glad I did this when I was younger and had the opportunity to really explore and see, move around, where now I'm not doing that. I've now been in very consistent. I still work with startups, but as an advisor, and that's part of the job. That's what you do. But yeah, I mean, there is value in, and I think there were other opportunities. I was offered a job with Facebook before it even came to Austin, and that's another story. But there are moments when I've thought if I had just, if I had just stayed there or done that, maybe things would have looked different financially at some point. But if there's anything that I can say about joy and experience, I definitely have not led a boring life, and it's taught me so much, and probably is the reason why so many doors have opened and why I've been able to do all of these things, because it is really international.
That leads us to our next segment, which is advice for others. I mean, obviously you've been advising a lot of companies and so on and so forth, and I feel like there's advice already been given. But as you look forward, or as you share and look at mentorship now and what our next generation needs, any thoughts on how they should look at life and look at mentorship, and or how does mentorship impact them?
Yeah, I would say platforms like Founding Up, even like Beam assessments, can be helpful to help identify their passions, or how to get into their interests. Not everyone has the privilege to jump around and move around and explore. Some people have to take care of their families really young, and might have certain disabilities that require them to stay in one area. I would say whatever place they're in, don't be afraid to ask questions and stay curious.
Yeah.
I think some of the best advice that my mother taught me really young was, she would always say, closed mouths don't get fed. So always and my dad would always say, always surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, because you're going to learn, and sit at the front, and it's okay to ask questions. So I was never shy about asking questions, and I was just I'm actually just naturally curious. I'm always trying to learn and like level up and but only with myself, right? It's like, so that's one piece of advice. And something that I wish I had followed earlier is like, just be yourself.
Authentic,
Be authentic. Like, I mean, authenticity has always been there with me, but I think like don't be afraid to pursue, to like give it a shot, like what you're trying to do, and be consistent. Like, part of even like in entrepreneurship, what we always advise is, you have to be agile. You have to understand your environment, and if something's not, it's okay to take a break, and like maybe you can pick it up again. But yeah, I would say just stay curious and don't be afraid to ask questions. Life will take you on all types of twists and turns, but it's just a big adventure. And like you have to, like, if you can find resilience within yourself and trust within yourself, then you'll make the right decision.
That's part 2, mentorship. Final stop, part 3, the takeaways, with Leonie's advice for building a life with choice.